So, man, I don't know. Here we are on my couch. This is my actual couch.
It's very comfy.
I am Nikki from MindSpark Research International, user research boutique agency based in Paris doing international stuff. I have my friend Sheila here with me. She is a friend. She is also an American in Paris, like myself.
Yes.
And she is a business coach specializing in Agile, lean, and product vision.
This is true.
Which sounds really snazzy.
All the buzzwords.
I have no idea what product vision means, but it sounds pretty awesome.
It's kind of like Cyclops, but with products and seeing where you're going with them. Like Cyclops with the
It's like
vision
homing
laser.
in.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and so here we are going to talk about stuff. So then I guess the other question for you would be, what about smaller companies? So like my company is obviously pretty small, and we have to do things at a quick pace, but normally that pace is like dictated by outside forces, right? So it's like clients being like, we need this done in 2 weeks, and we're like, okay, how can we get it done? But for us internally, in terms of like growing, and we're not necessarily developing a product, so I know it's a bit different, but in a way we are, because we are the product and our services are the product that we're offering, and we're always trying to work on those things. But yeah, so when I hear you talk about like retrospectives, I'm sitting here thinking like, how can I implement this into my team? And so like we do like weekly check-in meetings, which we called weekly tea meetings, because we all just get our cup of tea and then we get in front of each other and then we say, here's the stuff I'm working on this week. And for us, the point is more for me to hear everything that's going on, but also it gives people a chance to be like, wow, I'm super overwhelmed. I've got these 6 projects on my plate right now. And then someone else can step in and go, oh, actually, well, I have less. Do you need some help on that particular thing? So hopefully it touches on the empowerment piece and bonds us a little bit more as a team. And that way everybody kind of knows what everyone else is working on. So you never feel like you're just like working alone in a silo. But other than like those kinds of things, I'm sort of like, what can small companies do? Because I feel like I picture it being like when you say modeling, I'm like, how could I how can I do that?
Well, I mean, the good news, like I said, is Agile and all these different methodologies have been around forever. So there's so many different things to get inspired for that is out in the market. But unfortunately, what happens sometimes is idle worship. So, for example, Spotify created their own form of Agile feature teams. And so it's been replicated a million times. I've been brought in to even replicate it a million times. And even Spotify, I don't know if you read that article, they were like, stop it.
Yes.
Like, stop.
And I read another article written by someone who isn't at Spotify, but I think someone else who's a coach with a similar background to yours, saying the only company that can do the Spotify approach is Spotify.
Yeah.
And here's why.
Yeah.
And it gives all the reasons, like what they had in place for existing structure and their model for revenue, which is very unlike most other anything that exists on the planet. So yeah, so they were just saying like, stop it.
100%. So like we should look at them, but we should not do idle workshop. We can test their different things. There's many different like ideas out there. A ceremony, they're called ceremonies, all these different like meeting types that have different purposes. But it all comes down to not what your team can do that's agile, but like why. Like honestly, if your team is working completely fine with your weekly meeting, you know, as long as there is a avenue and a platform clear and open without any sort of, maybe people might feel intimidated to give their advice, as long as that is out there so that they can voice potential changes, and then to the team, that is quite important. And then I would say, if then people are like, well, for example, they could say, this is really nice, but I still don't really get to see what people are working on. Then you could be like, oh, well, what's out there? Well, there's something called a demo. So maybe you could do daily 1-minute demos of, let's actually look at what I'm doing and diving in. So there's many different things you can do, but first, depends on what you need, why. Why you need it.
Yeah. Which is a good point. I'm also very intimidating, so I should probably take a look at that and make sure my team can give me feedback. Just kidding, I'm like the least intimidating person ever. They're like running the show, and I'm just like, oh. Also not good.
No, it's important. It's important. Like there's a concept called a host leader that is a really big thing right now in the Agile community, and it's been around for a while, of how can you be a conduit for them. but still be not a directing force, but like a conduit, like create the structure necessary for that.
And offer guidance at the same time.
I mean, a lot of managers are very intimidated and sometimes even put like, sometimes not knowingly sabotage agile transformations or what have you, because they'll like, oh, well, I won't be needed anymore because everybody will just do their job perfectly. But the reality is we'll always need people that, honestly, managers become coaches, host leaders, and everything to help people in their journey as professionals. Like, that won't go away.
You just did that magical thing, which is when you provide me the segue for my next question. It was in my head, and you were like, I'm going to say a word that is exactly going to bridge anyway, and then I've just ruined it by talking. So my question was going to be, so what do you actually do as a coach who, like, people hire you to do what exactly?
Right. So one of my favorite analogies that another coach introduced me to is, honestly, I'm a coach. Like, I'm a coach for a sports person. And so the analogy he uses is like Usain Bolt. Like, does Usain Bolt have a coach?
I'm pretty sure he does.
He does. The answer
if he
is,
doesn't, I would happily take some money to say, run faster.
Spoiler alert, he does. Why? Because I'm a coach doesn't mean I'm better than you. It doesn't mean, it might mean I have experience that helps you reflect in a different way. But I'm just there to support teams in general in their journey towards self-questioning and self-actualization. My goal...
So you're like the resident philosopher.
Yeah.
You just come in and you're like, I'm going to mess up every single thing you've been thinking about from day one.
I ask a lot of questions. I don't give it's not to say I don't give a lot of responses, but I really try not to, because honestly, I'm not going to be the one maintaining it. Like, I'm lazy, okay? Like, I'm here to come and help people with their self-question. I'm basically a mirror. That then, and also I do quite a bit of animations, like team bondings and facilitating
animations. By the way, that's a
sign
of an American person living in France, because for all of you who don't know, she means, like, I don't even know how you describe it.
I don't even
moderation.
It's like an activity.
Leading discussion.
Like, it's a ludic. Oh, that's a French.
That's a French word also.
It's true. There's like no real.
There's no real word for it, but I say, so for my work, like in English, I would say I'm a moderator, and in French they say I'm an animatrice. So like someone who moderates, someone who's like at the forefront, like leading the workshop or the discussion or whatever.
Right. And so I'll even come in and I will sometimes, depending on the need of the team. I'll create the content, so I have like lots of different serious games where we're learning. I basically get the conversation starting, and I help people with their self-structuring. And I also do quite a bit of one-on-one coaching and team coaching and all kinds of stuff.
So out of curiosity, what's the difference between you and a therapist?
Well, a therapist is more, probably more degrees and more diplomas, first of all. But no, I mean, I think that's a good analogy, is that I'm a bit of a business therapist. I come in and I'm like,
tell me your problems.
And they're like, solve it for me. I'm like, only you can solve it.
Man, that's the best yet worst kind of therapy.
Yeah, it's
so annoying.
Well, I mean, I think they use this for the therapist, but they have the same joke in the Agile coach community where they say, how many coaches does it take to change a light bulb? The light bulb has to change itself first. So 0. Yeah.
Man. Yeah. So how do people react, by the way, when you come in? Like, let's say you get brought in to a company to do all this stuff and like help them undergo whatever changes or continue on their journey or whatever it might be. Like, how do people react to suddenly there's an Agile coach like on the team?
Not always well. Not always well. I make lots of self-defamating jokes, and I try to like make them feel at ease. But of course, like, especially if it's a team that didn't ask for it, and sometimes managers ask for it, but they don't really know what they're getting into. It can be hard. It's hard to question yourself. Because especially when you're in business, especially when you're a small startup or whatever, you don't feel like there's room for self-questioning, even though that could lead to a lot a benefit. So it depends. There's some that are like, oh my gosh, finally, we're so ready for this. And those are the best because already the manager understood they had to get their team on board before bringing me in. And then they're like super excited and they go for it. And I usually seek to create everybody on the team in the end should be a coach, in their own way. Like they have to be owners also of the mindset of the culture and all that. And then others, it takes a little while, but I find that in general, people are pragmatic, open people that do want to change. They just might have histories that have closed them up, and they might sometimes need to see it working before, which is understandable, before they'll buy in. And usually that's one of the biggest challenges in my job is to find what's that first small step that I can move them towards where they start owning it.
Owning it in terms of like taking responsibility for something that they're already doing?
Owning it as far as their steps towards changing the culture of their company or continuing it, or whatever that reason is that I was brought in. Because usually I'm not brought in because everybody's happy. Unfortunately. I have both the best job and the worst job ever. Because it's rarely like everything's perfect. You're basically
like the plumber. You literally are brought in to get the shit out of the toilet.
I'm like here to be like, it doesn't smell like roses. So it's really working with people to understand. Honestly, the first thing I always do is kind of like what I said to you a little earlier, like, well, why do you want to add an Agile thing? So I really work with them for like, why am I here? Maybe you don't need me. And I say that sometimes because maybe there are some teams that are super self-reflective that don't actually need a coach, or they're self-coaching each other. And then great, I'll move on to the next. I'm constantly trying to work myself out of a job.
Which is good. Then you can just take more vacation.
Yeah. I love vacation. I love it.
Okay, so my last question, I think, unless another one pops up into my brain, and if you don't know the answer, you're allowed to say, because this is a hard one and I'm putting you on the spot. I totally recognize. Did not prepare her for this question.
It's okay. I'm agile.
You're adaptive. It's the brown paper bag methodology. You heard it here first. So obviously you know a bit about what we do. So based on your experience as a coach and the different types of companies and stuff that you've worked with, what is the kind of value of the work we do for the organizations that you've been working for?
So especially bigger companies, but honestly smaller companies, this could be as well. It really depends on their product. I'm also like super product oriented, maybe because of my history as a product manager, but I'm always thinking of like, what is the service that you're providing, and then what are your needs? Also maybe because as a coach I'm looking at what teams need, because that's my service. Anyway, I digress. So especially bigger companies are very out of touch with their customers, and there's even sometimes like I wouldn't say like a mean like hatred. It's not like a distaste, but sometimes they're like, it's almost like, oh, these customers, they just don't understand our product, or
which is a problem,
right?
If they don't understand your product,
right, exactly. So I really find 100%. I'm a big believer of everybody on the team getting to know the customers and sometimes that's very hard if you have a very, very niche, especially if you have a niche, or you have something like, I don't know, mothers in their early newborns are using it, like something that it's hard to kind of get to know. Having people like you that can bring in like qualitative, actually like stories of people versus just numbers, because as we know, like we honestly, people as humans, just like they hear numbers and they're like, unless it's really big, they don't really care. So I think it's super important that if you do any sort of user research, hopefully lots with Nikki,
business plug,
that then it is shared with everybody. And so that basically it gets people in touch with why they're doing it. Like I'm a very strong believer in, if you have a sense in your work and you know why you're doing it, even if it's just like, I don't know, let me think, like an app where you get coupons. Okay, like you might be like, oh, whatever, I'm doing an app that does coupons. But then you like hear the stories of the women that can't pay for their formula if they don't have coupons. It
matters.
It matters.
Yeah. My experience is actually that some of these, like you said, sometimes big companies can be really out of touch with their consumers. My experience is usually that they actually are doing research, but they'll do research like once a year, and they'll be like, we know our customers.
Yeah.
We had those focus groups, remember, in like 2016. We know what they think about this, which is, you know, again, not really agile. So I guess if they're thinking that way, they're not you know, buying into the agile mindset in the first place.
100%. Like agile is supposed to be on all levels, cyclical in everything. So it can get sometimes overwhelming in the beginning because you're not used to constantly questioning and refreshing data and read it. But that includes, okay, maybe you can't do a user testing every 2 weeks, but like an agreement to do it once a quarter, or even, well, preferably more, but you know. And I think also there is an issue with smaller companies if they can afford user testing, and because they're so small, they think they're already close to their customers, and they're not.
Yeah. So actually, you just raised a good point. One of the other issues that I face with some of the bigger companies that we all interact with in our daily lives, they actually do so much research, that their issue ends up being that people end up duplicating research because this guy didn't know that guy just did a really similar thing, and you know, they've got all these different product teams, and so this product team is like, oh, we're going to Brazil in order to research this, and this product team, totally different product, and they're like, we're going to Brazil to do this, and then they end up being in the same place at the same time, not even realizing that they were going to be there because the company is so big. So I feel like that's another hurdle that is difficult for us to overcome, because we want to really know as well, like, our clients' product teams and like the products that they're offering, and like get on board and help them to kind of like streamline all of the different research that they're offering. But sometimes there are companies that are so agile that they're literally just like
machine
they're like I think the thing that's funny about it is that they're really keen on not working in silos, but in a way they end up putting themselves back into silos.
100%.
Meta.
Yeah, no, and I would consider that fake agile. Like, that gets to the point where it's quote unquote, because like at the same time, it now sounds like I use agile when I agree with it, but but for me, it's a very pragmatic approach. It's very much making, the thing they talk about in the manifesto is making software that works, that is technically solid, that customers love, like, point blank. So if your research is all over the place to the point where you're out of touch with your users, then like you're just moving fast for no reason. Yeah. And maybe you have the money to burn and you can do that, I guess, but
yeah, what's the point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's the point?